In this video, I will explain why releasing oil from the Strategic Oil Reserve causes oil prices to go up and taxes to go up. Petroleum Reserve, or SPR, is the world's largest emergency reserve of oil. It's stored in artificial caverns in Texas and Louisiana. President Biden announced on March 31st the largest release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPR, in history. He announced he was going to release 180 million barrels of oil at a rate of 1 million barrels per day. He says he's doing this to lower gas prices, as Western sanctions on Russian oil have impacted the markets, international oil markets, to the tune of about 3 million barrels of oil lost per day. At the same time he announced this release, the International Energy Agency also announced they are going to release 60 million barrels of oil. NPR says this is going to reduce the cost of oil by about 15 cents per gallon of raw oil. In the same story, though, NPR did report that this was fine because they were going to have to replace the oil within a year. And then 3 days later on their website, in a footnote, they updated the story to correct and say that this was not always required, and it wasn't clear that it was going to be required in this case either. This is the largest release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve since it was created in the 1970s. Note, this isn't a loan, which would be required to be paid back at a certain date and time, but instead the administration has so far yet not defined when this will be refilled and isn't required by law to refill it within a year, as NPR originally misstated. The SPR currently holds about 564 million barrels of oil, or about 1 month's total consumption of oil for the United States. The SPR is at its lowest level since 2002, because since 2015, Congress has been using the funds from selling oil to fund the budget deficit. In fact, the Bipartisan Budget Act, which was passed in 2015, authorizes future sales of the SPR going out to 2025. And the last time the SPR was full, that was December of 2009. This isn't the only release from the Biden administration. In November of 2021, they announced 50 million barrels of oil would be released in a loan. This loan was to address high gas prices at the time, before the war in Russia and the sanctions. And 30 million barrels of those loaned 50 million should be starting to be repaid very soon. Hopefully that will offset some of the oil that's going out. So how will this cost taxpayers and consumers money? We're just selling the oil at a higher price and we're going to buy it back when it's cheaper, right? It's dollar cost averaging. Investors know this well. It'll average the cost out and save consumer money by flattening the cost of oil over time. Except it isn't, because there's no free lunch. There are tremendous costs associated with buying, transporting, selling, refilling, and retransporting, storing, and securing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. As of December 2020, the SPR employed 111 federal employees and 887 contractors and subcontractors. Now, to be fair, the costs associated with keeping the reserve aren't specific to the releases being discussed here. Also, the SPR, it's located on the Gulf Coast, very close to an integrated supply chain that has close by oil wells, docks, and refineries, as well as the storage. But that doesn't mean that these items are free. The SPR budget is split out. There's the SPR cost for the actually operating and maintaining the SPR, and then there's the SPR petroleum account. This SPR petroleum account funds activities related to the transport, acquisition, and injection of resources into the SPR, as well as costs related to the sale and delivery of petroleum products from the reserve. For the fiscal year 2022, they've been authorized a budget of $12 million. So there is no free lunch, and the economics don't change with the policy, the politics, or the party of the administration that makes the release. In the end, the taxpayers pay higher prices because we've got to operate the release and refill of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which we wouldn't normally incur. And consumers are going to pay higher costs at the pump and other oil uses later on, because it just makes logical sense. If releasing oil now causes oil prices to drop even by just 15 cents, then buying oil later is going to push those oil costs back up in kind. Except now we've got to pay the overhead. So don't buy into the political hacks that say that this is going to lower prices for consumers.